All right, here's a grade 7 unit, Unit B, plants for food and fiber, and we're going to look at section 1 right now. And the very beginning here, we need to indicate or explain what a seed plant is. And really, the definition of a seed plant is right in the phrase, seed plant. Seed plants are plants that make seeds. That's basically it. But a lot of times we may not realize that all plants produce seeds because we don't see it, right? First of all, seed plants come in, like it says here, all shapes and sizes. So you can think of something really large like a cottonwood tree that we have down in our coulees. They produce seeds. All that cotton that starts flying around in the springtime, each one of those fluffs of cotton contains a seed or two from the cottonwood tree, and that's just how the cottonwood trees disperse their seeds, right? So they produce seeds. A daisy, flowers, we know, yeah, of course they produce seeds, right? Apple trees, things that produce fruit, right? Yeah, of course they produce seeds. We see them all the time. Grass is something like our lawns is something that we don't really think about producing seeds. But if you let a patch of your grass grow for, a few weeks, it actually will bloom. That grass seed will bloom. Grass seeds, I'm speaking generally now, but they have very small little yellow flowers, or sorry, white flowers, and they produce a fair amount of pollen actually when they're nice and ripe. But anyways, so grass produces seeds as well. Okay, spruce trees, they're a much different type of seed plant, but they are just as much a seed plant as any of these. They produce seeds. But we don't talk about them as seeds. Parts of their cones have seeds. It looks a little different than what we typically consider. Okay. Now, seed plants, all these different plants that we've just considered here, very different in their size and their structure, how they look, and all that stuff. But all seed plants, these 4 included, all have 4 major parts that are the same. So I want you to think for a second, what all these that we've just looked at, grass, cottonwood tree, daisies, what are the 4 things that they have in common? What might they be? Well, let's look at this. These are the 4 parts. We have flowers. They all will produce flowers of some sort. Okay, I'll look at some variations in just a second, but they produce some sort of flower. They all have a stem. If they're big enough, like they're a tree, that stem can be referred to as a trunk, but it's still the same thing. Actually, let's go back to flowers. So sometimes a seed plant will not produce a flower, a pretty flower, what we think of when we think of flower, but they will produce a structure like a flower, and that's actually where the seeds get produced. Anyways, I'm dragging on here. So stem, another thing we could talk about is a trunk, a leaf. They could be the needles of a tree, right? And then roots, they come in all shapes and sizes. Okay. Now, I did want to talk about the functions of each of these as well. Okay, so let's go back. Well, let's start with the roots, actually. What do the roots do for a seed plant? What is their function? They have a couple that I'm going to throw down here. First of all, a lot of people, they say, well, they anchor. They anchor the plant. They provide some support. And that's very true. Another thing that the roots do is they absorb water and nutrients. They absorb water and nutrients. Okay. We'll get to that. We'll elaborate that more as we kind of go through the unit. Okay. Let's go to the leaf. What do the leaves do? Plants, when they first start off, their seedlings, they have huge leaves. Very, very important to produce leaves first. Okay. Any ideas as to why? They are absorbing sunlight. And why would a plant want to absorb sunlight? Of course, you betcha, for photosynthesis. So when they're very young, they want to absorb as much light as possible because they want to make as much food as possible because then they will grow up big and strong and healthy. Okay, so leaves absorb sunlight. The stem, okay, a couple things for the stem. First, you might say that it holds up the plant. So it is very important in supporting the plant, and that's very true. But there's another function as well. If you look at the insides of the stem, okay, the stem is like a highway, so it transports nutrients. Okay, so it takes nutrients from down in the roots. This is only one thing it does. Okay, and it's the highway to get water and nutrients to wherever it needs to go. Okay, and it will also carry nutrients from the leaves because that's where photosynthesis happens, right? And it will be the highway for it to distribute the food to where all the different parts of the plant. Okay, so it's like a transport system for nutrients. Okay, let's go to the flower. What does the flower do? Flower has the flower structure has one main function, and that is to make seeds. So the flower is all about reproduction. It's all about reproduction. Okay. Now I want to look at another. Oops. I have another. What am I doing here? I have another diagram that I want to show you, and that's kind of like just a little bit of a up close look at a spruce tree. Now you may think, well, this is a little different. Is this a seed plant? You betcha it is. Okay. So I don't have to tell you that it has roots. You know it has roots. You know it has a trunk or stem. But leaves and leaves and flowers, they don't have leaves and flowers. They kind of do. Okay. Let's start with the flower because that's the most obvious one. So all their cones, these are like flowers. Okay. So we're going to get into the next section, or one of the next sections, we're going to look at reproduction in plants, seed plants. And they reproduce in the same way. There's an exchange of pollen, an ovule is fertilized, and that's how you get a seed, right? Happens the same in these guys. They don't have a flower, but they have cones, and the cones essentially do the exact same thing, okay? When pollination occurs, successful pollination, then there will be seeds, right, inside these cones, which can be dispersed as well, and that's how you get new baby little spruce trees. Leaves, they don't have leaves, but they do have leaves actually. They have all these little needles. All these little individual needles are leaves, okay? Very, very different structure. We're actually going to talk about them in a different context a little later on, but each one of those is a leaf, and they do photosynthesis via their needles, which are their leaves. Okay, so and there are other plants too that have different structures, but they all will have these basic four things. They will have a flower or some structure for producing seeds. They'll have a stem or trunk. They'll have a leaf or needles or some scales, depending on the type of plant we're dealing with, and they'll have some kind of root system. Okay, and that is the first part. Oops, that's the first part of section 1 of the plant unit.